Why are we on our phones so often? At what point do we start feeling like we need to check our phones every few seconds just in case we have missed something important, even when nothing has actually happened? How does one quick check turn into an hour of scrolling without ever giving us the answer we were looking for? In my case, the habit started with a person, and it didn't end there. A while back, I was dating a person who was hard to read. Some days, he replied within minutes, and I'll feel like the spark between us was real. Other days, nothing. Hours would go by. He could disappear for the entire day, then come back as if no time had passed at all. Like it hadn't even occurred to him that I might have noticed the silence. I never knew which version of him I was going to get that day, so I did what felt natural at the time. I stayed close to my phone. I kept it beside me while I ate dinner, next to my pillow at night, in my hand while I was supposedly doing something else entirely. I'll tell myself I was just going to check when he'd last been online. Just a quick glance to see if he had been active. Somehow, that quick glance always turned into something longer. Instagram, then YouTube, then TikTok. I'll scroll through whatever was there to give my hands and eyes something to do while I waited. I think, in some strange way, I believed that if I could keep my thumb moving, the waiting would move faster too. That somehow I would earn my way back to the conversation. Sometime later, that relationship ended. Life moved on. I changed jobs. And somehow, in an entirely different context, with an entirely different group of people, the exact same feeling found me again. This time, no one was leaving me on read. Instead, there were endless comments on shared documents asking for changes, back and forth messages, replies that felt like they were already overdue because someone was waiting on the other end. Soon, I was the one who wanted to disappear. Whenever my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, I'll feel completely overwhelmed, mentally exhausted. I fell back into the same habit when I was anxious in the previous relationship. Every night, after work had finally quietened down and I knew no one was expecting a reply, I would scroll. The constant notifications had left me questioning whether I was doing enough. When everything finally went quiet, all that was left was the echo of my own self-doubt. I didn't know what to do with it, so I filled the silence with more things to look at. At the time, I never stopped to question the habit. It just felt normal. It felt like what busy, stressed people did. But now, looking back on both of those chapters side by side, I noticed something. Two completely different situations, a relationship and a job. On the surface, they had nothing in common. Different people, different expectations, different reasons to feel anxious, except for one thing. Every time I found myself questioning where I stood or whether I was enough, I would lose myself in scrolling. It would have been easy to tell myself the problem was my ex-partner or my own job, but I realized neither of them was the real cause. I struggled to sit with uncertainty that touched my self-worth because it felt extremely unfinished. Like there's a loose thread somewhere that keeps tugging at your attention. Everything else keeps going, but part of your mind stays with the unanswered message, the unfinished conversation, wondering where you stand or whether you're enough. And when I didn't know what to do with that feeling, I reached for anything that promised a little relief. Most of the time, that was my phone. It didn't really matter what was on the screen. I just needed something to fill the space where the discomfort was. But you know what? After a long stretch of scrolling, I never felt calmer. I never felt like I was successfully past the time. I always felt worse. It felt like a fog settling in somewhere behind my eyes, a kind of heaviness, a dullness, like my head was full of something I couldn't quite name. I'll put my phone down and feel foggier than before I picked it up, even though nothing had actually happened. Nothing had been resolved. No message had come. I just spent 20 minutes consuming all the people's lives and somehow ended up more tired than when I started. I scrolled because I didn't know how to sit with uncertainty. But instead of letting the difficult emotion run its course, I kept layering more noise on top of it. When I was on my phone, every feeling seemed to find another piece of content to keep it alive. Sadness found more sadness. Self-doubt found more comparisons. Anxiety found more things to worry about. After a while, it became hard to tell which thoughts were mine to begin with and which ones had simply grown louder because I kept feeding them. By the time I finally put my phone down and went back to whatever had been bothering me, I wasn't just carrying the uncertainty I started with. I was carrying everything else I'd picked up along the way. Things I'd seen online that had nothing to do with my life. Ideas I hadn't meant to dwell on. It became difficult to tell where one feeling ended and another began. That's honestly a conversation of its own. How much of what we feel is actually ours, and how much of it quietly found its way in while we were scrolling. Maybe I'll come back to that in another episode. But even without understanding all of that back then, I could recognize the pattern. I'd scroll for hours, and every single time I'd ended up feeling worse. After spending so much time in a world that never seemed to end, I found myself craving something finite. Something I could hold, shape, and eventually put down. That's when I bought my first block of air-dry clay, and I started noticing something different. Clay didn't miraculously fix my issues. The uncertainty didn't disappear. It didn't answer my questions or make everything okay. But it also didn't make things worse. It stayed where it was, steady, contained. That was new for me. Before that, the longer I felt uncertain, the bigger the feeling seemed to become. I think the difference was that my attention was finally resting on something real, something I could hold and focus on without more information constantly competing for it. There was nothing to refresh, nothing changing in the background, nothing I might miss if I looked away. It was just me, the clay in my hands, and whatever emotions I'd worked into the room with. I know these stories won't be everyone's story. The reason I wanted to share them is that we often talk about phone addiction, doomscrolling, or spending too much time online as though it's simply a matter of self-discipline. Like we just need to be better at putting our phones down, or that our attention spans have become shorter because of the generations we grew up in. While those things might play a part, they are not always the whole story. Sometimes there is something happening beneath the habit that's much harder to see. Stress, self-doubt, loneliness, grief, or emotions we have never really learned how to sit with. And if we don't try to understand the actual cause, we may end up expecting the same solution or the same timeline for people whose struggles were never the same to begin with. For a long time, I thought I was trying to regain control. I thought if I checked often enough, stayed on top of every message, or never missed a notification, I'll feel more settled. In the end, I realized all I was looking for was reassurance. Those turned out to be two very different things. And if I understood that sooner, I might have recognized that my phone could offer a moment of relief, but never the answer I needed. So before you go back to your day, I would like to leave you with something small. The next time you catch yourself endlessly scrolling, take a moment to ask yourself, what am I hoping to find on the other side of the screen? Maybe it's distraction. Maybe it's reassurance. Maybe it's connection. Maybe it's pure entertainment. Or maybe it's something else entirely. It's easy to focus on changing the habit itself. That's often the quickest thing to do. But if we never really understand why we keep coming back to it, we might find ourselves replacing one habit with another while the thing we were trying to soothe is still there. Maybe take a step back won't give us all the answers, but it might help us meet ourselves with a little more compassion. And I think in a world that asks so much of us every day, that's already a good place to start with. Thank you for spending these moments with me. I'll see you in the next episode.